A gray day. It was a gray early evening, partly cloudy and almost getting dark. The atmosphere was partially blurry but visible enough for her to see her immediate surroundings. Charlotte had no driver's license and had never driven a car before, but for some eerie reason, she had her hands on the steering wheel of an old Mustang and was speeding down the empty highway. On the left side of the road was an endless concrete wall, so high that it penetrated the clouds in the sky and so long that it stretched into the distance as far as the eye could see. On the right side of the highway was a tall, thick forest that extended endlessly down the road. She was sweating profusely and driving so fast that she feared that she would cause an accident. It felt weird that she was driving the car even though she had no knowledge about how to drive any car. Something at the back of her mind told her that she needed to make a left turn, that she urgently needed to find a way to get to the other side of the wall. Unfortunately, the wall was too high for her to climb and seemed to extend endlessly down the highway. Suddenly, she saw an enormous steel gate. Charlotte jumped out of the car and ran towards it. She tried to open it but without success. It was firmly locked. Through the bars of the gate, Charlotte could see what was on the other side of the wall. It was a boys' high school. There were teenage students everywhere. She remembered that school. It was the brother school of her high school, an all-boys school, an academic rival of the all-girls boarding school that she had attended in high school. It was located just a block away from her high school. The boys in that high school typically did not get along with the girls from her high school, as both schools constantly competed with each other to produce the top student in the country. Charlotte recognized one of the boys and began banging the gate to get his attention. She called out his name and asked him to open the gate for her. Her shouts garnered the attention of most of the students and teachers, who in return limited themselves to staring in her direction. All the boys were in uniform, standing still, staring blankly at her without saying a word. They seemed to be awake yet under some kind of hypnosis. Despite her loud shouts for help, none of the boys so much as moved a finger. They just limited themselves to staring at her. She instinctively looked down at her body and was horrified to find that she was in full school uniform. She knew there and then that the boys from the rival school would not open the gate for her. Charlotte ran back into her old Mustang, and the second she placed her hands on the steering wheel, the car began to speed down the highway again. She felt trapped, blocked by the huge wall to her left and by the thick forest to her right, with nowhere to go except either forward or backwards. Not that she knew how to reverse the car. Speeding down the highway, suddenly a ridiculously large, giant-sized, green-eyed porcupine appeared out of nowhere and jumped onto the car. The monster-sized beast, which had enormous steel quills on its back, sides and tail, attached itself to the side of the car using its huge steel claws and attempted to open the door of the speeding Mustang. A horrified Charlotte removed her hands from the steering wheel and placed them on the door handle as she attempted to keep the door firmly shut. The minute she took her hands off the steering wheel, horror of horrors, the speeding car came to an abrupt halt. The beast removed the door with its strong hands and threw it aside. Meanwhile, Charlotte scooted to the other side of the car, opened the door and ran out into the thick dark forest. She ran deeper and deeper and deeper into the forest without looking back. Suddenly she noticed a little baby boy who looked to be about a year old, seated on the floor of a furnished house with no walls, windows or even a door. The baby was in the open air, playing with dirty dishes. She stopped and walked nervously towards the child. I wonder where his mother is. She thought. I can't leave him here. If I do, the beast will eat him. I need to save him. She bent down to pick up the baby. Suddenly she jerked and fell backwards. The baby had transformed itself into a monster cobra snake. With its head raised in anger, the snake spit its venom at her, missing her by inches. Meanwhile, in the background, Charlotte could sense that the giant porcupine was headed her way. She got up and ran further and further into the thick forest until suddenly, she couldn't move her feet. Charlotte looked down and to her horror realized that her feet were stuck. She was slowly sinking into a bog. At this point she was knee-deep in the mud. As she struggled to get her sinking feet out of the bog, she sank faster, and faster. She quickly went from being knee-deep to realizing that the lower half of her body was inside the bog. Meanwhile, the giant snake caught up with her. It recoiled itself and raised its head, slanting backwards in preparation for another attack. Charlotte continued to struggle violently to get out of the bog and found herself sinking deeper. As her chest sank into the mud, she began to struggle to breathe. The cobra striked. She moved her head sideways and it missed again. She sank lower and lower. With her entire body now inside the bog, she struggled to move her neck. She sank deeper. The level of the mud pool reached her chin. She started suffocating. She tried to scream but her voice wouldn't come out. Charlotte sat up on her bed panting. She had just had yet another vivid nightmare. She looked sideways at the clock in the stand next to her bed. It was almost 4 a.m. Normally she would be waking up to prepare to go to work. However, she had resigned from her job the previous night so she knew she could go back to bed. She planned to spend her first day of joblessness in bed, sleeping. An exhausted Charlotte turned around with the intention of going back to sleep but the light from the open laptop beside her on the bed caught her eye. The battery was almost flat. She had forgotten to plug it in. She pulled the laptop closer and realized that the email that she had sent the previous night was still in her outbox. It hadn't gone through because she had forgotten to switch on her data. Consequently, her resignation letter had not been sent. It was still sitting in her outbox. Charlotte realized that she had two choices. She could switch on her data and allow the resignation email to automatically go through, meaning that as of that moment, she would have no job, no income to support herself, she would lose her financial security but regain her mental and emotional stability. Or she could delete her email and just go back to work, put up with her narcissistic boss and have the financial stability of knowing that all her bills will be paid even though it would slowly cost her her mental and emotional health. The end. Copyright 2022 Matilde Mbulo. All rights reserved. About the author. Matilde Mbulo is an author dedicated to analyzing everyday issues through her very own unique lens, which is reflected in her books. She has a bachelor's degree in law, a bachelor's degree in psychological counseling and studied human resource management. She is the author of 6 books: Hiding in Plain Sight, Stories from Lucklandia, Mistakes Experience Wisdom, The Kanzas, Narrow Crook and Through the Dark Tunnel. For more about Matilde Mbulo, visit the author's page on Amazon.com/author/Matilde Mbulo.